Good afternoon and welcome to the Plant Health Care PLC investor presentation with Wilbur Ellis to discuss the US market opportunities. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be on listen-only mode. Throughout, questions are encouraged. It can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, we'll review all questions submitted today and publish responses where appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Chris Richards, CEO, Jeff Tweedy, COO, and Scott Addy, Vice President of Branded Technologies and Biological Solutions at Wilbur Ellis. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everybody for joining. One of the most critical planks of plant healthcare's strategy is partnership with strong distributors, which give us unrivaled market access for our products in key countries around the world. And that's really important for our growth as a company. Now, one of our most important partners is Wilbur Ellis in the USA. And thank you very much, Scott, for joining us today. And having you as a really senior guy in Wilbur Ellis with us today is really, really important for all of us. So thank you for that. Now, I've been in the ag industry pretty much all my life. And of course, I've known Wilbur Ellis for many, many years as one of the largest distributors in the USA. However, the company's privately owned, and it's very likely that many of the plant healthcare investors don't know very much about Wilbur Ellis. So maybe, Scott, you could start off this session by telling us something about Wilbur Ellis. How big is the company? How do you play in the US ag market? And maybe you could also say something about your personal role as Vice President of technologies and branded technologies and biologicals. What does that mean? So, Scott, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. And it's a real pleasure for me to be here this morning, my time at least, and to be able to talk to you about Wilbur Ellis. I guess real quick on myself by way of introduction, I've been with Wilbur Ellis a little over 7 years. I've been in this role with branded technologies is what we call it for around 4 years, which is our proprietary business. We've got a very broad range of products like adjuvants and value-added nutrition products, organics. We've got actives, and we've got a line of what we call specialty products, which are mainly West Coast type fit products. But I've spent my entire career in the ag business. I grew up on a farm and spent most of my career prior to coming to work for Wilbur Ellis on the supplier side of the business, on the chemistry side. So worked with for companies like DuPont and Griffin LLC, and started in the business with American Cyanamid. So I had that background before coming to Wilbur. And like Chris said, I think it's really important to spend some time to learn a little bit about Wilbur Ellis, because since we are privately owned, there's not a lot of public information about what we do, earnings, anything like that. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about how we go to market and describe the company for you. And I'm sure there'll be some questions that come up. So Paul, if you would advance my slides, please. I just want to start off that we are celebrating our 100th year anniversary this year. Back in 1921 was the start of the business. So we just turned 100 back in the summer of this year. And, the legacy is great, but we really are focused on the future around Wilbur Ellis and what's, we have a little saying, what got us here is not going to get us there. And we're very focused on the future and what we need to do to be in a business for the next 100 years. So briefly, the business is made up into these different divisions. I'm in the ag division, and we're known by Wilbur Ellis, of course. That's the largest division. I'll describe this on the next slide. But we also have several other divisions like Connell, which is mainly focused in Asia. It was really the start of the business back in 1921. They're a manufacturer and have several agreements with larger companies and do business in the Asia Pacific. couple years ago, we bought Nature's Alpine, which focuses on pre-plant fertilizers. It's been a very good acquisition for our company. The nutrition business is focused on pet and animal food. Here recently, we bought Rankin, which is a leader in aquatics and fish feed. And then Cavallo Ventures has been around for several years. It's run by Wilbur, Mike Wilbur, who is a family member. And this is basically our investment arm. And I want to talk a little bit deeper about this because we've got several lines of investment I think you may find of interest. Just as an example, I'm not going to go through all these, of course, but we've got over 20 investments in companies like Sound Ag, if you're familiar with them. They have products that basically elicit responses from plants to produce their own nitrogen and can reduce fertilizer rates. Trace Genomics, which we're big time into soil health. So Trace Genomics deals with the soil microbiome and is working on a path to have recommendations on what is needed to improve soil health. Robotics like FarmWise and Sabanto, which has autonomous equipment. And we've got many others, but I just want to kind of share just a few with you. Several others in the technology space as well that we use behind the scenes in terms of writing code and our precision ag, things like that. But these things are very important to our company. And this space we think is going to be extremely interesting and will be the future of agriculture in many ways as we go forward. So Paul? So the ag division specifically, we've got turnover this year of about $2.4 billion. This business is located almost exclusively in the United States in these green areas that are highlighted. We've got about 160 locations that are owned by Wilbur Ellis. We also have 80 locations that we call alliances. That's where we have a contractual arrangement and it's on crop protection and we own the inventory. We report that as our own retail, but expands our footprint. So that makes us the fourth largest distribution retailer company in the country. We've got about 2,800 employees and about 650 field agronomists that interact with growers directly and sell just about anything a farmer would ever need to grow a crop. And most of our business, as you can see up above, is retail. About 88%. So that's a farmer direct type of model. And then final, a couple more slides, just real quick on high level strategy. I'm not going to go into all these pieces here, but I would say one of the main things that we're changing and putting more focus on, we feel is important in the future is around the customer centricity and how customers are changing and bringing more value-added type solutions to farmers. And my personal opinion is I don't think we've ever seen an age where farmers had more information and didn't have as many solutions in a lot of ways. I mean, they've got all this information, they've got data, and the question that we hear is, okay, well, what do I do with this stuff? So what we're really focused on is what is the solution? And so having the right combinations of programs, products, and things like that to ultimately increase yield, return on investment, whatever the goals of the customer may be is a big, big focus of ours. And then I would say finally, Paul, if you flip to the last slide here, I just want to give you a view of how we view partners. I would say, most of our relationships are on the left side of this chart, very transactional. However, plant healthcare is definitely what we would consider to be a strategic partner because we've got the relationships, we're working on solutions, we're working on co-development type of opportunities, and we're sharing of the information, and we are in an exclusive type relationship, which is a really big deal for Wilbur Ellis. It allows us to really release the resources in terms of our R&D field teams, our sales teams, because we know we've got the commitment and we can count on Plant Healthcare long-term to be a partner. And so that, I just wanted to point that out because we have very few of these relationships and they're very, very important to us. So Chris, just a quick overview there, but that's kind of me and the company.
Scott, thank you so much for that. That's much appreciated. And I'm going to pass to Jeff in a minute, but there are just two questions which I think I'd like to put to you myself. The first one is one of the things you point out. You have, 1,650 agronomists out there. Plant healthcare, we only have 2. So we get a tremendous leverage. And one of the things you said is that you go out there and you have a whole suite of products and you put together the best program for the grower. So the way I think about that is you kind of, so far as we as supplier are concerned, you control the access to the farm gate. Is that a good way of thinking about that? And how would you respond to that?
Well, we definitely have a major influence over our customers. And part of, I think, what makes Wilbur Ellis unique is that we were really, our mission statement is to maximize our customers' return on investment by bringing advanced technologies. And so we really pride ourselves on being the gate, to use your word, of new technologies and how to use that on the individual's farms. We've got some technologies like TNS, Total Nutrition System, where we actually do leaf sampling as an example. That's a big deal in apples, which employee has a lot of play there. And it's about, that level of detail where you can actually make very specific recommendations around nutrition recommendations. A lot of those apples are organic. I think it's about 40%. So choices that fit into that scenario, like we have many organic products, especially on the nutrition line, in terms of maximizing his crop. But it's really about bringing the value and the products in that solution. So yes, we use suppliers' products, we use our own products with branded, and the relationships, just like plant healthcare here, to do all those things.
And the key, of course, is having products that work. And employ, of course, for our investors is the brand that Wilbur Ellis manages of Harpin Alpha Beta in specialty crops in the US. One last question from me, Scott, then I'm going to pass to Jeff. That you touched on the topic of sustainability, which is really important to us in plant healthcare as a company. Everything we do is oriented around helping to make agriculture more sustainable. How strong do you see that trend as being in the US market? And what is Wilbur Ellis doing about sustainability? Is that something you plan to accelerate? Is it something that you see can help you gain market share? How do you view sustainability?
It's very important to our company, and I'll give you a few specific examples. One of our biggest products that we have is humic acid, and that's a big part of what we have in our soil health programs. And humic acid allows the molecular structure to make nutrients more available in the soil, so you have much more efficiency. We've had a product called Nutrio Unlock for several years, which is basically a microbial consortium that unlocks phosphates. And I mentioned some of the others, like investments we have, like on sound, which is, leads to the potentially reduction of nitrogen. I would also say organics has been a focus for Wilbur Ellis for a long time, much more, I would say, than most of our competitors. We've got our own line of organic products. One of our most exciting technologies we have coming is we've got a relationship with a company called New Organics, which is they have chicken litter, laying hens, and they have technology that we dry product is readily available, but it's not very transportable and it's not very available immediately. So they've got some technology that's very exciting where we can actually have a liquid product that's a high end and immediately available. And so those types of things, I think, we're right on the edge of some really interesting technology changes that will be much more sustainable. Think about all the dairy manure. It's got applications for that. Many things that I think will change and add a lot of value to what farmers are already doing as well. So very, very important. And I guess I would say, Chris, to summarize this, is our approach to this is around developing the technology and the solution to carry to the farmer.
One of the messages that comes across for me in what you say, Scott, is sustainability and supporting your growers. This is pretty complicated, and Wilbur Ellis does complicate it very well. That's one of the reasons that you make a great partner from our point of view. But I'm going to pass the floor now to Jeff. Jeff.
Thank you, Chris. Just one thing I wanted to mention before we get into questions I've got for Scott, but one of the reasons that we've chosen Wilbur Ellis is because of their ability to market access, like Scott talked about. If you look at our in-market sales growth from the time we started this partnership, Harp Alpha Beta has grown 67%. And one of the reasons that that's possible, two of the reasons that's possible is, number one, Wilbur Ellis is very strong in these markets. And number two, as Scott mentioned, these are exclusive relationships. So we get the full energy of the Wilbur Ellis team behind supporting it. And that's why we've done the have the relationships like a Wilbur Ellis, which makes us different from a lot of the companies that are out there. So I just wanted to show that slide. This is really strong, and this is why we partner with someone like Wilbur Ellis. So Scott, you and I have worked together a long time, but really with Plant Healthcare the last 4 years. Can you tell us why you would pick someone like a Plant Healthcare, and what do you see the opportunities for this technology as this market continues to grow and as we work together as a team?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff. And yeah, you guys would be amazed at the numbers of bio type companies, technology type companies that come through our doors. And, I would say there's probably 85-ish or so that we're aware of. And that's not really a manageable number from our standpoint. So we actually have a strategy to get deeper with fewer suppliers. And we intentionally have gone about a process of picking what we believe would be winners based on their technology, their pipeline, the way they go to market, some of the things I mentioned about the way they partner, the way they either do or don't do registrations. There's a lot of people that want to just have like a fertilizer amendment and, wink, wink, nod, nod, this thing might have some fungicide activity too. We don't do that kind of stuff at Wilbur Ellis. So products that are researched, registered correctly with good partners are very critical to us. And so we look at segments. So obviously employee is a very attractive segment for us because we're the leader in the apple business and wine, grapes, and a very key player in almonds as an example. So very good fit there. And so from a segment standpoint, with more biologicals coming, particularly nematicide type activity products, that's a segment that we really want a product in. And so we identified Plant Healthcare as a high winner potential, already had good products and a pipeline of many more to come that fit into what we wanted to do. So it was a natural fit, I guess, Jeff, is what I would say.
I would agree. And the strong relationships you have, like with what you showed with your retail, I think was really important for us in those specialty crops. You mentioned employees specifically. What kind of feedback are you getting from growers? We showed the numbers growing, and kind of what are the prospects for the future that you see for employee today?
Yeah, it's got a lot of potential. I mean, a lot of our activities have just been on expanding the product and the footprint. So our Cascades area, which is apple focused, but also the Columbia Basin and the Willamette Valley, and getting further east into areas like Michigan, as an example. And we're really excited about the nematode suppression possibility of employee. And so crops like almonds and grapes, cotton in Texas, there's a lot of opportunity for this product. So our sales teams are very focused on that. And again, those are areas, particularly on a nematicide type product, that we've been looking for alternatives for quite some time. We've also done a little bit of repositioning on the product. It had been more of a cherry cracking type of product in the past, and we're focusing not only on that, but on coloring, like on apples, and neck sizing in pairs as an example. So there's a lot of differentiated type fits that we continue to expand the product with, and I think it's got a big future.
Good. Last question for me, Scott. In 2020, we signed a joint development agreement for the new pre-tech technology, and as you mentioned earlier, bringing new technology, having partners that have that's really important. Can you talk to us about where you see pre-tech fitting into kind of the next generation, and talk about the upcoming product launches? We've got pending registrations for 279 and then the 949 registration going in these specialty crops.
Sure. So, we have a couple of good biological type fungicides in our portfolio, and that's probably the area that had the biggest concentration of products for the last few years. However, 279 is very exciting from us for the disease spectrum that it has. Most biological products are very focused, narrow spectrum. This product looks like it's going to be a broader spectrum. I'm talking things like Phytophthora, Fusarium, Rust, and we'll have a fit in a lot of broader type crops, row crops, as well as specialty crops. So we're very excited about that and think it's got a lot of potential in the fungicide space. 949, I mentioned nematodes before, but that's really exciting. And for our presence in crops like almonds and cotton, corn, grapes, potatoes, rice, soybeans, a lot of potential in those crops. And then, a little further down the line, some of the biostimulants that are in this line that we've been working on. I think as we get deeper into these, we'll find fits for more of these as well. One thing that we've discovered is there's not just one answer in a lot of cases when you're talking about these type of products. They are part of a program, and being able to fit these pieces together in solutions for the farmer is very important. So I think we'll continue to find more and more of these opportunities as the pipeline unfolds. But super excited about the potential here.
Us too, and Scott, really appreciate it. Chris, we'll turn it back over to you for some of the questions from the audience.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. We've got a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and I'm going to have to select a few of these for us to go for. I think what I'll choose first is Simon C. You ask a question. I think this is for Scott, really. Why do you choose plant healthcare products? Are they unique for you? And are there a new revenue stream for you? Are you substituting other products, or is this a new revenue stream for you?
I'd answer that a couple different ways. We've got good familiarity with plant health care, and Employ has been on the market in different forms for many years. So we've got good familiarity. Product is very good. And we changed our relationship, which we got deeper with. And I would say probably the most exciting part is the future and the pipeline with peptides. So we know we've got a good company to work with. They've got a good pipeline. And we will be substituting in the future more biological type products for synthetic products. There's really no question about that. And especially in the markets that I mentioned. I mentioned apples is already about 40% organic. That's probably only going to increase. When you talk about wine grapes, very high organic or sustainable type numbers already. So these type of products are the future in a lot of ways, especially in specialty crops. However, I would say going forward in row crops, as products get better and better, we'll find more fits there too.
Right, thanks for that, Scott. There's a related question here from Andrew C. You talk about biopesticides in general cutting into conventional chemistry. Over time, how far do you see that trend going?
It's hard to have a crystal ball on that. I mean, it is a focus and a strategy of ours to drive these technologies, particularly in these crops I mentioned, where we've got a really strong position. But I would say as technology gets better and better, we could see transitions that'll, 25%, I think longer term, 50% perhaps with the right kind of technologies. One of the biggest holdups in the States is a lot of the markets in the United States are driven by herbicides, and there's not really choices there yet. And those are big markets and big dollars. So that's why you see most of the activities have been in fungicides and nematicides and stimulants and things like that. If we did get a legitimate herbicide, it'd be a game changer.
That's great. I'm going to turn to a different question now. Simon C. Also says, how long does it take for new products such as plant healthcare ones to get market traction? What's the typical growth pattern from initial launch to stable recurring sales? Now, Jeff Tweedy showed that graph with very good compound annual growth rate over the last couple of years. Where do you think sales could be in 5 years' time of employees specifically?
I think we would continue on that same type of trend because we've got a lot of open space, new market opportunities, new fits, some of the things I mentioned earlier for that product specifically. But generally speaking, Chris, I would say new product launches, it depends on the fit and the need that's out there and what the product actually does. I mean, I've been part of product launches where there was huge holes that people couldn't fill and had huge needs, and we had super rapid adoption. Typically, we don't have as much of that anymore. So, we have to have a lot of focus and training and R&D work development to really get good traction and get initial uptake. Typically, we would want to see maximum type markets or good penetration. You got about 3 years to really get your maximum penetration, we believe. So, relationships like this where we can dedicate the resources to our R&D teams is essential to have the data generated so we can prove these concepts out very quickly before people are actually selling them so they have the confidence. Otherwise, you're kind of spinning your wheels for a couple of years trying to generate data once it's already here.
Right, and thanks, Scott. And there's another question which might be partially for you, Scott, and partially for Jeff Tweedy. From Alex C. Can plant healthcare's technology be incorporated into other products to produce a synergistic effect, or will it always be a standalone product in crops?
I would say from the Wilbur Ellis standpoint, the answer would be definitely yes. We have a lot of products that are combinations of several different products, particularly in the nutrition space. An example of that would be we have a line of seaweed products called Tidal Wave and High Tide, and those are incorporated into some of our other nutrition products. Again, we want to bring the solution, and that's really what farmers need, if we can, is to bring combinations of multiple products.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Chris, I mean, a lot of the work that we're doing with Wilbur Ellis, we have looked at standalone in certain markets, and there's some different crops. We've looked at combinations like with sulfur, for example, or what can we do? Wilbur Ellis is a significant player in that market. How can we put Harpin or our pre-tech in with that to bring something that's differentiated? So I think there's applications for both. And, just adding on to the last question, one of the nice things about this relationship is that we'll have the ability to train and get the teams educated on the sales and technical teams long before the product's launched. So there's a familiarity where if you didn't have that relationship, it would put us behind, and it would take some time to educate and train people. So I think that gives us a head start when you're looking at launches of these new technologies that come in. The Wilbur Ellis team has been working with it for 2 years already. So they're comfortable where it fits, where it doesn't fit. We've got positioning ready to go. So now it's just a matter of, as we move toward launch, is educating growers, which those are the things that we're working on now, is how do we get the growers in tune to the product. And I think that's a real critical piece of this relationship and why it's so important from my standpoint.
Great, thanks for that. So Wilbur Ellis Plant Healthcare have been working on pre-tech, as you said, for at least 2 years now, and Plant Healthcare is expecting registration middle of this year for PHC 279, the first of the pre-tech products. And there's another great question here from Alex C. That Harpin Alpha Beta Employ is the main product with Wilbur Ellis at the moment, but it is going to come off patent pretty soon. So the pre-tech platform is patented, has a very long patent life. Is the plan to phase out Employ and phase in pre-tech peptides over time? Or Scott, Jeff, do you anticipate they'd be sold side by side for quite a long time yet?
I mean, I'm happy to start and then turn it over to Scott. Yes, the patent is off, that's correct. But I think there's a couple of things that we do to kind of protect ourselves. If we were selling this to everybody, then everybody could go get it. And so I think the relationship that we have with Wilbur Ellis and other partners in different parts of the world, creating that unique relationship makes it more difficult for others to come in. That's one piece of it. And then manufacturing at scale is the other piece of it. This is not, it's not an easy process, and there are very few people that make it. And so those things protect us. Not to say that someone couldn't come in, but they're going to have a pretty significant investment. And so the return on that investment, I think, makes it a little prohibitive for that. So relationships with distributors is our first pillar to prevent that off of a non-patent, and then the manufacturing. I think on the, the IP, we have very strong IP on the pre-tech. Number of patents have already issued with more to come. So I feel we're in a great position there. Long term, the IP is protected, and we'll continue to add to that.
I would just add, from our standpoint, there's not a ton of overlap on the products that are coming in the pipeline. So they look very complementary to me, and for the foreseeable future, it looks like we would have all these in the marketplace because they're in different market segments.
Great, thanks both of you for that. As we look to the launch of PHC 279 as the first of these pre-tech peptides, Alex C asked the question. He was keen to see that we have recently published that we have nearly unlimited supply of pre-tech product from our new toll manufacturing agreement. And he asked a great question. What is the timeline between receiving a huge order, which we really hope we will, Scott, and this being filled and supplied to the customer? And what's the shelf life of the product? Maybe that's one for Jeff initially. Come on, when Scott gives you that big order, how long is it going to take?
It's actually a fascinating question. So I think on the shelf life, we expect the shelf life to be 5 years or greater. The product has good stability as long as it's held in the conditions where it stays dry. So, and we've had Harpin for 10 years, as long as it's stored properly and been well within specifications. So we don't expect any difference in the 279. I think the manufacturing is an interesting question, and we're working on those things. Right, we'll work with that as Wilbur Ellis as we go, but we're dealing with that in Brazil right now. That is scaling up rapidly, and so the manufacturing lead times, we need forecasts probably 6-8 months out. So we work with our customers, have a lot of dialogue around those things, and then put our forecasts in. I think as that relationship builds with those suppliers, those lead times will come down. But as initially, we've got at least 6 months lead time for those manufacturing. And in fact, that'll start next week. So our first scale up will begin next week for our business in Brazil, and we're very excited about that. So I think as long as there's good dialogue, that's what really helps on lead times, and make sure that you have enough product. And we have good conversations with all customers on that.
Hey, Chris,
sorry, Scott, go ahead.
I would just add real quick. I know formulations and stability are not really sexy topics, but they're extremely important. And a lot of other suppliers in this segment struggle with that. And you'd be surprised how many presentations we see, and they don't have stability, and you have to use refrigeration, and anything less than 2 years stability just really isn't practical in a large scale agricultural setting. So it's very important what you guys have.
And I would just, one more thing I'd add, Chris, is I think there's 4 important things from a simplicity standpoint when you bring a product to any of our customers, but specifically with Wilbur. I think you got to answer 4 questions. Can you make it? Can you make money at it? Does it have a long shelf life? And can you register it? And does it perform? I think if it does those things, you check the right boxes. And I think, just following on to what Scott said, if you can't walk in and provide that, at least answers to those questions, it becomes very difficult for our partners to say, why would we use the technology? And so I think one of the things that we've demonstrated that we're past those things now and really focused on the commercialization. I think that's really important for any product that comes to market. And I think that's what separates us apart, is that we bring those things to our customers.
Maybe just to tease out that forecasting thing a little bit, maybe Scott, Jeff, you can talk a little bit more detail about how you work together to come up with forecasts. So, agriculture is a slow old market. Many of these crops, they only apply once a year. So how do you work together to build forecasts? So, for example, right now, plant healthcare, we've got pretty good visibility of your 2022 forecast because that's how you do the planning. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, from our standpoint, our portfolio management group, we have a product manager that he focuses on these products, and we actually have a stage gate tool that's called Bubble. That's an odd name, but it's basically it starts from the market analysis piece and goes all the way through registration, and forecasting volumes is included in that process. So as we learn more about what are the benefits of a product, the R&D trials, the fit, what crops it's going to be registered on, geographies, all that kind of stuff, ultimately that will turn into a volume forecast when we understand rates and how many applications, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we do that, especially on new products. It's very detailed. There's some guesswork in there is in the initial launch stage, but we've had a pretty good track record of being able to identify the market fits and the volumes that need to go in there by crop. So.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's a great tool. Our teams work really close on that. In fact, I think we've got some meetings on some of that this week to talk through 22, 23, and beyond. The other thing I would say, Chris, is just on the Harpin business, the employee business we have today. We talk once a month at least with the product manager, and so we're getting feedback on where the on-ground sales are, where the opportunities are, and the growth. And so it's kind of a constant dialogue where we get that information. You wouldn't get that if you didn't have the relationship that we have, not to the level of detail. And so we really appreciate the transparency that Wilbur Ellis has given us. And so it helps us forecast, plan our business better, and for quite frankly, capitalize on opportunities, because as we look where the business is growing, we're going to be, moving into California with employee this year. We've got growth opportunities, as Scott mentioned, in Texas. We're going to need to stay on top of that. And sometimes those things expand a lot quicker than you expect. And so I think that constant dialogue and communication is really helpful for planning of us delivering the business, but also planning our business and greater visibility of what's happening.
Hey, Chris, I would add also that was kind of a matter of necessity for us, is to have that discipline type tool, because our business in the branded technologies, half of the business is in products that were not in the portfolio 5 years ago. So we are constantly introducing new products, new launches, new combinations, and we had to have that kind of discipline to be able to make all these new introductions, because it gets pretty complicated.
No, that's a terrific speed of innovation, and really, really interesting. Now, I'm very conscious of time here, and I'm sure Paul will tell me when it's about time to pull the plug here. But there are just a couple more really good questions here, which I would like to answer, Paul, if we've got another couple of minutes. The first one here from Andrew C. is, Scott, do you see or work with many companies, biological companies, which are platform technologies, or are they often narrower technologies, single products?
A lot of companies tend to be pretty narrow. That's why we're interested in probably broader platforms that can fill segment needs. But I think over time that's going to change with certain companies. I don't think that's a very long list. Again, that's why we were so interested in the relationship with Plant Healthcare, is because of the peptides and all the different opportunities that offers. But most of the times what we see are fairly specific, narrow fit type products, which is a challenge for us, again, to bring, because we're wanting to bring solutions.
Great, thanks. And you make a great point about, Plant Healthcare's peptides. We're working on 4 different peptides with Wilbur Ellis, and we have a bunch of others that we can bring forward from our platform. So I have a very modest aim of having a peptide on every acre one day. It may take us a little while to get there, but we've got a wide range of peptides. So that's really exciting.
It's really difficult for us to try to do business with a one product company. I mean, it's hard.
Right. Great. Well, that's helpful from our point of view. There's another great question from Alexei here. What is your customer retention like? Do your customers, your growers, return regularly? And do they tend to use the same product, or do they move to different products? And how important is word of mouth as a driver for product adoption?
Yep, good question. So Wilbur Ellis, we have very good retention rates. We actually do studies with our customers about their willingness to recommend Wilbur Ellis, and we're typically in the high 80s as far as retention. In some ways, that's the nature of the ag business. Once someone, especially a lot of the markets we're working, it's almost having an accountant or a banking type of relationship. They've got all the data and the relationships and the background. But we have very good retention rates, and we're very passionate about bringing, like I mentioned several times, the new technology, the solutions, which I think definitely helps with that. So farmers, in a lot of ways, they are creatures of habit. They want to try to do the same things as best they can. But we live in a world where they're having to change, and again, they want the best partner to come up with what changes they really need to make to, best option for their soil, maximize the return on investment, the crops, whatever the case may be. So again, I think that's a very good fit for what we do at Wilbur Ellis.
Great, thanks. We've got a couple more really good questions. I do want to, Paul tells me we've got another couple of minutes. From Roger F. here. So how do you characterize fruit and vegetable farmers in the US, and how does that influence the way you would introduce a new product like PHC 279 to them? And how would these farmers differ from row crop farmers like corn growers? That's a pretty big question. How would you tackle that one, Scott?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure I understand characterize, but they definitely have, in our opinion, they have more needs in terms of this is a permanent crop. So you're not talking about just 1 year annual crop like a corn crop would be. I mean, certainly there's complications with annual crops, but in our view, specialty crops like fruit trees, almonds, wine grapes, things like that, definitely long-term, harder to see differences perhaps than in annual crops. And you've really got to take a bigger view in terms of soil health, fertility. That's why we do our leaf sampling. That's why we've made some investments in companies like Trace to really understand the soil microbiome, because it can get really complicated in specialty crops. So it's a much deeper dive. And I think the farmers in those crops are looking for more type of solutions and alternatives to just synthetic chemistry as well. So that's probably the biggest difference. And we tend to have our largest investments around specialty crops too. So in terms of our manufacturing base, I mentioned humic acid, but we're big time into things like dusting sulfur. Again, not a very sexy product, but it's certainly from an organic standpoint. And you talk about grapes and specialty crops, I mean, it goes on multiple applications, just about every acre out there. And it's combinations of those type of programs and those crops. It can get pretty complicated versus row crops, which tend to be many less applications. And again, the nature of an annual crop where it's over and then you start over next year. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great answer. Thank you. There's another question from Andrew C. here. Which I think is probably directed at Jeff, but maybe Scott would have a view as well. Will pre-tech product registrations likely always be submitted by Plant Healthcare in future, or could some be made by partners? Are partners potentially able to get them approved quicker? I mean, you made the point, Scott, that it's really, really important to get a proper EPA registration. Maybe between the two of you, you can think about how to answer that question there.
Jeff, why don't you start?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, I think initially, yes, we would, just because we've generated the data. And, one of the things Scott and I were talking the other night, we had our regulatory teams at dinner and it's like, we want to support, and I think Scott mentioned this earlier, some other partners, but we don't want to do the work for you. And so I think where there's relationships, we bring in the folks within Wilbur Ellis to help us, like California, for example. But I think we'll continue to own those registrations. If it made sense with other partners, yes, we would look at that. But I think right now we'll maintain that. But the key thing for us is we want to make sure that we're supporting their business and utilizing their personnel in a way that's supportive of what we're doing, but not doing the heavy lifting for us. I think that's why it's important for us to have a registration team internally.
Yeah, we're really good at field trial research, programs, fits, generating data, but we're not really a basic type regulatory group. So the combination of what you guys do, Planet Healthcare, and what we can pull off at the field works really well.
That's great. Now, I'm just going to pick out one last very specific question, and then we're going to let you go, Scott, because I know you've got a busy day over there. You're great in the US. What are your plans for international expansion? Roger F asks, do you operate in Canada? Do you plan to operate in other parts of the world?
We don't operate in Canada as the ag division. Nature's the Alpine division is Canadian, and they do quite a business there. We've looked at several different companies over the past few years, in terms of acquisition, where we would essentially have to buy our way in, but we haven't really found any traction there yet. We do have a group within Branded Technologies that we call channel partners, where we sell to people outside of Wilbur Ellis, other distribution companies, things like that. And we've got a fair little business in Central America, where we're selling our Branded Technologies down there to distribution companies that have access to those type of markets. But we're by and large focused on the North American market and kind of opportunistic, opportunistic, I would say, if opportunities came available in Canada or more so in Central America.
That's great, thanks. And maybe we could just wrap up. Paul B asked a question. Okay, Scott, what makes Plant Healthcare's products distinctive in your view? The products, the technologies, and maybe the relationship as a wrap-up question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think this is part of what we look at, but we really appreciate the relationship here and the proven technology and the pipeline. This fits into these segments that we're very focused on, allows us to bring that kind of differentiated value in an exclusive type manner to our customers, which is extremely important from our standpoint. And we know that plant healthcare can deliver on that. The formulations, the stabilities, the things that nobody really wants to spend much time on, but are extremely important in the overall experience with the farmers. If you've ever had to walk fields and handle complaints and things like that, it's not a fun experience. And, having to rebuild that is not fun either. But the combination of all those things, the expertise, the technology, the pipeline, the way we work together, the relationship, we understand each other's roles, are exactly what we're looking for and able to ultimately deliver on our value proposition for our farmers. So we really do appreciate the relationship and think we're on the right track and think it's going to be a lot of good times ahead.
Great. Thanks for that, Scott. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking time to talk to all of us today. And thank you, Jeff, as well. I'm going to pass back to Paul now.
It's fantastic. Chris, Jeff, Scott, thanks again for covering off so many of those questions from investors, and thanks to the investors for submitting them. Of course, the team will be able to review all questions submitted today, and we'll publish responses where appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. On that basis, Chris, I don't know if you've got any final words just before we redirect the investors to give you some feedback, but any closing comments would be great.
Yeah, just very, very quickly, we're really excited to be working with Wilbur Ellis there, and I do thank you, Scott, for taking a big chunk of your morning to talk to us and everybody. Wilbur Ellis is a great partner for Plant Healthcare. You were kind enough to say some nice things about Plant Healthcare, but the way that you have your first of all, you're very big. We can leverage our two guys who we actually share with another distributor as well. So it's in effect only one across your nearly 1,650 guys in the field. That's a huge leverage for us. And the fact that you make recommendations to the farmers, which the farmers respect because you do the trials, you do all that work. And you, as you mentioned, that you've maybe 80 different biologicals companies who want to work with Wilbur Ellis, and you've chosen as one of those few companies, Plant Healthcare, to work with. We take that as a great privilege, and thank you for that. And from the investor's point of view, I think the final point to bring out is how, just listening, Scott, Jeff, to the two of you talking, how close that relationship is, which means that we have really quite good visibility of 2022 from a plant healthcare point of view, which is really important to that we can make sure that Wilbur Ellis has enough supply, and also that reflects in our financial results coming through. So again, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Chris, Jeff, Scott, thanks again for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order the team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and is greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Plant Healthcare, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you and good afternoon.